Okay, so I am really excited to be with you today. This learning circle is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I'm Lisa Siegel, and I'm welcoming you to this Active Hope: The Legacy of Joanna Macy for Environmental Education Learning Circle. I'm going to start by acknowledging country and the traditional owners of country throughout Australia whose land was never ceded. I'm on Gumbaynggirr country here today, the mid-north coast of New South Wales, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures across this continent who have cared for and exemplified connection to country over countless generations. And as we usually do at our A Squared E Squared events, if you care to acknowledge your own country in the chat, that would be wonderful. Hi, Annie. Annie's already hopped in there. Lovely to see you. And let us know who you are and where you're from. We would also take a moment to acknowledge the context in which we gather. So a little bit of intention setting here at this time when our human species is having an unprecedented impact on this planet in so many ways. And we do this at the beginning of this gathering to remind us that the discussions we have here, the decisions we make, any actions we take will have consequences for other people and other species, both those living now and into future generations. And Joanna Macy herself was all about future generations and all about the other than human world as well. So it's always great to give that intention. Thanks everybody for sharing where you're coming from. Now I'm just going to launch right in. The hour is going to go by really fast. I could talk about Joanna Macy, who's one of my most influential teachers of my life forever. But I would like to start by asking what your experience with Joanna is, just so I have a little bit of background of who is here with me. So there's one, two, three, four possibilities. If I've never heard of her, I'm aware of her, but don't know much about her. I've read some of her work. I've read heaps, and it'd be really great to know where we sit here. How many people? We have 33 people here, which is amazing. We had 118 people register for the Learning Circle. That's a lot of people, and I think a lot of people register because they are keen, like they can't make it now, it's dinner time, etc., but they're keen to watch the recording after. So with the 33 people we have, almost everybody, I'll give you one more second to share. And if is everybody, does anybody have a problem with the poll? Can you all see it? Oh, from Italy. Wow, that's great. Hello, Sabina. And from New Zealand, we're international tonight. Aotearoa. Okay, I'm going to stop because I want to keep going. So we have I can share it with you. 4 people who have not heard of Joanna Macy, 8 people who have heard of her but don't know much about her, 12 who have read some of her work, and 3 who have read heaps. Okay, that's really good to know. And Meg sharing have encountered her work through John Seed's Deep Ecology workshops. So that's really helpful for me to know. And this tonight we're going to talk, how we're going to talk is what we're going to discuss is going to be about her work, but also I decided out of she was 96 when she died last month, out of her huge body of work. I'm particularly focusing on the idea of active hope, which probably attracted some of you to the Learning Circle as well. And I'm going to just share a little bit about that. This isn't kind of an interactive Learning Circle too. So, but you don't have to talk if you don't want to, or share if you don't want to, but we'll have little opportunities to hop in and share. And then of course, ask any questions, pop questions in the chat, put your hand up. Andrew is here. Andrew, wave hello. Our project officer. So he's going to help with tech support, etc., etc. So Joanna Macy, when Joanna died last month at the age of 96. She's an American eco-philosopher. I was really sad, and I was talking to my 25-year-old son, and he was like, what was it about? What's it about her that made you so sad? Like I was really in grief about this, losing my teacher. And I said, when I think back on my life from becoming a young environmental educator and activist and teacher through the years, I cannot think of anything that I do that is not influenced in a way by her teachings. And he said to me, Mom, you're so lucky that you have somebody in your life like that. And I thought, oh my gosh, I really am. And so if I can share a little bit of my passion and the influence that she's had over my environmental thinking, philosophy, teaching, and research, um, maybe that will be helpful to you. Um, so just in particular about this idea of active hope, which was, so Joanna started out in this world of activism and environmental philosophy, actually as a anti-nuclear activist back in the 70s. So when she started developing her work on anti-nuclear, that was her big awakening. And when she started developing her work around that, she started understand, and she and her husband traveled with the Peace Corps around the world, so they were had a lot of experiences with people around the world around this. They first called, her and her husband together called their work despair and empowerment work. They understood that people around the world were activists, but what was getting in their way and burning them out was the despair that they felt around the possibility of nuclear annihilation. So her work was called Despair and Empowerment. Around the 80s or 90s, she really had almost an environmental awakening, thinking, oh my gosh, it's not just nuclear, kind of destruction that I'm worried about. It's actually biodiversity loss, climate change, all that kind of stuff. And so she expanded her despair and empowerment work to include environmental threats. And she founded a movement called The Work That Reconnects because she saw that one of the main problems of why people were feeling so much despair and disenfranchisement and inability to move forwards with their activism was they felt disconnected. They felt disconnected from each other, from the world. They felt like they couldn't move forward. So the work that reconnects is an international movement. Their work that reconnects facilitators. Joanna came to Australia in the 80s as well, and she worked with John Seed, who came and did a learning circle with us earlier in the year. If you weren't able to attend that, we have the recording available. And John and Joanna worked together to develop more work that reconnects. But in Australia, we more call it deep ecology. And John kind of took up the baton and ran with it. And most of you have probably heard of deep ecology retreats or philosophies. And deep ecology is about reconnecting and understanding that we are nature, we are part of nature, and that the interconnection of humans and everything else is what this understanding is what is really needed in order for us all to move forward towards a more life-affirming world. In the last decade or two, maybe 10, 15 years, I think Joanna moved into, she kind of going, well, work that reconnects, it sounds a little bit and like the people that get it really get it. But in the mainstream, she was looking for a term that more people could attach themselves to. And she started working with this concept of active hope. So this is the way her work kind of developed. And so she wrote a book called Active Hope with an Englishman named Chris Johnston. But this is her words. Active hope is a practice. Like Tai Chi or gardening, it's something we do rather than have. It is a process we can apply to any situation, and it involves three key steps. First, we take a clear view of reality. So we understand what's going on. We educate ourselves. We learn what's going on. Second, we identify what we hope for in terms of the direction we'd like things to move in or the values we'd like to see expressed. And third, we take steps to move ourselves. So she said active hope is not a noun, it's a verb. And she was very, very clear about that. And she said the guiding impetus is intention. We choose what we aim to bring about, act for, or express. Rather than weighing our chances and proceeding only when we feel hopeful, that we focus on our intention and let it be our guide. So the amazing thing also about Joanna was that she offered many, many tools. And so tonight, what I want to offer you is there's many, but I just chose three, two conceptual tools and one pedagogical tool. So two tools where it kind of helps you shift your thinking around things, and one actual tool that you can use in a classroom, in a community education setting, wherever, in your daily life. Now, I know some of you have heard me, I've given workshops on this before. Some of it will be repeated. Hop in any time if you want me to try and deepen it. So I'm trying to have a wider kind of lens. But again, if you've heard it before, ask me questions, like if you need to like go a little deeper, and I'm super happy to answer them. Okay, so the conceptual resource, the first conceptual resource that I want to share with you is Joanna's telling of the three stories of our time. Okay. And basically, she's saying there are three stories, and this was so helpful when I first heard it because I can tend to be a little gloomy about everything that's happening. She says, look, there are three stories that are running concurrently at this time. The first story is business as usual. It is the industrial growth society. It is that everything is as normal. We can keep growing on an infinitely on our planet. And I don't have to go into that too much. We see that around us every day of the business as usual, where people seem to be ignorant of the fact that, we can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. But business as usual exists. We deal with it every day. That's how we live. The second story is the story we go to in our darkest, dimmest nights. And unfortunately, these days, it feels like that is happening more and more. The great unraveling, where we're like, oh my gosh, we just need to get a whole bunch of lentils and water and bunker down, and the end times are coming, and there's nothing we can do about it. We've tried our hardest, but oh well. Those two stories exist like side by side. But the third story is the great turning. And this is the story that Joanna bases all her work on. And she says, in the human heart, we have so much creative potential. We have so much love. We have so much care. We're so smart. We can turn. We have all the solutions. We can turn our world, as bad and bleak as it looks, we can turn it into a life-sustaining world. And towards the end of her life, she's like, oh, it's not looking that great. But I'm not gonna say it can't happen. I'm not gonna say it can't happen. Um, so, and also like I did a training with her, a week-long training, and one of the things I mostly remember was she said, and even if you did have a crystal ball and you could see how everything turns out, would you want to? No, because that would take the fun out of it. She was I'm going to show you a little video clip of her in a minute, but she was very inspiring person to listen to. So I just want to take a few minutes and let you write on the board, or you can write in the chat, or you can turn on your microphone and just share. What are some of your own personal, like think about your own personal experiences, even just today. What is it, something that happened that was business as usual? What happened as a great unraveling? What happened is that showed you that the great turning is possible. Now, for those of you who don't know much about Zoom, you can click on something called, where is it? Annotate, is it not here? Are we going to not have this? I didn't even think about it. Andrew, can you see the annotate? I didn't even think to check that there was not going to be an annotate. Hmm. Okay, so I teach at a university. Oh, look, somebody's annotating.
Yeah,
Who
people are in
figured?
there already. Yeah.
Okay, who figured out how to do it? Because I can't quite see on this. Can somebody tell everybody how to do it that's doing it?
You just press on the text box on the left-hand side or the pencil.
Yeah.
On the left-hand side of, oh, on the screen. Oh, the little pencil. Look at that. That must be a new thing. Thank you. Little pencil on the bottom left-hand side. I'll just let you, anybody, any questions so far as well? So far, let me know.
This is crazy. I can't do it. Changing.
Yes, and type in the chat too. If you can't get it on the screen, type in the chat. That's also not a problem.
I'll get rid of it.
And Great Unraveling, the South Australian Algal Bloom and Donald Trump. Maybe we can donate Donald Trump to the Algal Bloom. That could be a good thing. So if you click on the annotate button down there, I don't know if you can see, but a screen comes up, you press the T and it lets you type on the screen. Yeah, whoever wrote that business filling up my car with petrol. I did that today, and every time I do it, I was like, ah, I'm just like, here we go, filling up my car with petrol. I totally get that. No worries. Okay, so we have oh, and Frankie, you can't even see them on the screen, the annotations. That's a bummer. I'll read them out. So keep going if you're still writing. Business as usual. Filling up my car with petrol. Emails. Subsidies for fossil fuel expansions. I can't read this, but I don't know if it says prayer or player. Dream World expansion on koala habitat. Ooh, I didn't hear about that. Paying rent or mortgage. Government not recognizing climate. Getting a haircut. Ever more intensification and work efficiency. Going to work. Continuing of coal mine expansions. Right-wing hope in big numbers, going to the supermarket shopping. So business as usual is kind of an interesting combination of like things that you do every day and also diving into the great unraveling, Zoom meeting. And then in the chat, meetings about business as usual, as if things aren't going to radically change. Okay, and so then with the great unraveling, we have the algal bloom, Donald Trump, 100,000 people at the National March in the UK, which is pretty yuck to read about, climate report from the government, genocide in Gaza, gas expansion in WA, the Woodside expansion, destroying ancient petroglyphs. And then in the chat, we have paying a major bank for your AEV and climate-related natural disasters, and there's some more business as usual, meetings about business as usual. And then the great unraveling, reading the National At-Risk Assessment Report. And then banks falling apart, big tech, So it's pretty easy to write that list, and it can get depressing, but look at the beautiful list, and this is important, is the Great Turning, Kids in Action, First Nations Knowledge and Leadership, heaps of Enviro grants, which is great. Young people passionate about their future. The Great Koala National Park, which was just declared here on the mid-north coast of New South Wales after 13 years. Woohoo! Gardening to make wildlife habitat and veggie gardens, sharing resources. So many beautiful butterflies in my garden. This learning circle, picking beans and strawberries with the grandkids from our garden, planting seeds for spring. Beautiful. And then people talking to the Turning National Infant and Children Disaster and Mental Health Advisor Group, chatting to like minds, people wanting to make a difference. Beautiful. And Suzanne's book group, Ecological Spirituality, beautiful. Acknowledgement and connection to country more widespread. Agreed, Julie. And Fiona sharing a casual washed all the wax wrap food coverings in boiling water, and it's a mix between unraveling and turning toward hope. But just the fact that they wanted to redo them, like as opposed to put them in the bin, to me, that's the Great Turning, right? So really beautiful. Thanks, everybody. I'm just going to take a little screenshot of that. Thank you. And then I need, unfortunately, to erase it at this second. So I'm going to clear it away in order to move to the next slide. And so these three stories of our time, like I said, we have business as usual, the great unraveling, but the Great Turning. And then this is the second conceptual resource that I think is really important, especially for us as educators. Okay, so the other thing about the three stories, that's pretty easy to understand and keep in your head. This bit is really important for us as educators, okay, because we work with people, children, young people, adults, who have a lot of eco-anxiety, eco-grief. It's becoming more and more known that that is a thing. Even if they don't express it in really clear ways, we know it's out there. How do we help them understand that they do have agency and that they can make a difference, whether it's big or small? Joanna's 3 Dimensions of the Great Turning is a fantastic offering for that. So this is an educational tool that I use so much, no matter what age I'm working with. And I'm going to play a video of her explaining this because it also gives you a little opportunity to be inspired if you haven't seen a video of Joanna Macy. It's a 5-minute video. And then I'll want to hear from you what actions, what you think about each of these 3 dimensions. Hopefully you can hear it. Not yet.
Now, it's really important to learn to see the Great Turning because it is not being reported in mainstream media. So you have to, it's not on the front page of the New York Times and the evening news. So you have to have detecting ability. And it helps to realize that the Great Turning is occurring in 3 dimensions. So we can remember them in terms of parts of our body. So one dimension, the most visible, we can connect with our hands. That is, so that dimension of the Great Turning where we say enough. Enough is enough. No more mountaintop removal. No more military development. No more subprime mortgages, etc., etc. This is the dimension which is often understood as activism. And it's those activities that slow down the devastation being wrought by the industrial growth society. After all, it cannot help being destructive. because it needs to turn the living body of Earth into commodities and profits and extract more swiftly than the Earth can renew, and dump more than the Earth can absorb. So it is by nature a self-destructive system. And this dimension of the Great Turning is slow down the deforestation, slow down the walls built dividing our neighborhoods and countries, slow down the terror, the imprisonment, slow down the building of more penitentiaries, slow down.
Whoops. Why did that stop?
The contamination of our food, slow down the destruction of habitat.
Mm.
And in this dimension, there is such play for courage and fierceness of heart and good sense of companionship as you link arms with your brothers and sisters. But that's not all, because even if every one of those actions should succeed, which they don't, in case you haven't noticed, most of them fail. Spend most of your time looking for money or trying to, at any rate. The second is those structures and ways of doing things that are sustainable in themselves. This is a creation of new ways of holding the land, new ways of growing food, new ways of building green buildings, new ways of computing prosperity and wealth, new ways of generating energy. So there is this tremendous scope for creativity in this dimension of the Great Turning. And I don't think there's ever been a time in the history of humanity when so many new things are just popping up. I go like this because I think of them as shoots, green shoots coming up through the rubble of a dysfunctional civilization. Yeah, you can train yourself to see them. But you know, that's not enough for the Great Turning. Even if all these actions succeeded, they would not be enough for this revolution. They will shrivel and die unless they are deeply rooted in our values and what we see as real and important, and how we see ourselves related to each other and to the living planet. And that dimension is, we can mark them right here. That dimension is a shift in consciousness. So these three have been tremendously helpful to me, because it reminds me that I don't have to do everything. And that they're brothers and sisters engaged beyond my capacity to know in this blessed unrest, this largest social movement in human history. And behind it, not only human effects, but there are evolutionary forces that have been moving us toward complexity and interrelatedness and consciousness since the beginning of space-time. And these forces are moving through us because this living Earth doesn't want complex life forms to disappear. We can give our lives for that.
Very inspiring. Let's see why that isn't going. Sorry, I'm going to unshare that for a second. Just wants to play it again. Okay, here we go. So, and I should say, so wait, I'll share again, but at the beginning she said you can use, your different body parts, and then she doesn't make it really clear, but the holding actions, I'll just share again. The holding actions, she said very clearly, yes, that is, oops, from current slide. Okay. There we go. Holding actions are very clearly hands, and then the changing structures and the creativity that is needed to change the structures come from your head, and the shifting consciousness comes from your heart. So that's her body parts that she's affiliating with all three of those things. Now, I also didn't mention before about Joanna that she was a scholar of both systems thinking, so science, and Buddhist philosophy, which is a really fascinating combination. So, and she's written like 12 or 14 books, so highly recommended that you go in and pop in and out of some of those books, and I'll share the titles and links to some of them in a few minutes. But the combination of the science of the natural world and spiritual philosophy is very strong through her work, and her whole thing is about how everything's interconnected. You can see that already in what we're talking about. So again, just for a few minutes, if you care to share, first of all, does anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts, anything that you want to add about these three dimensions of the great turning? I just want to make sure it's like clear enough. Does everybody kind of, understand it? Or does anybody want to say anything? Suzanne's giving the thumbs up.
Yep.
Add anything,
Got
because
it.
I know that some of you here. Okay, Suzanne?
I've got it. I'm right with her.
Okay, you like it.
I'm
And I know
carrying
some
on
of you,
in spirit.
yeah, that's right. And I know some of you here have, a more, clear. And so head, heart, hands model, very helpful to remember it through that one. And Amy's asking, could you go through the changing structures one, please? So that, so holding actions, like she said, it's the one that we always think is activism. So we're like, I'm not an environmental activist. So many people, I mean, I did my PhD on women environmentalists, and Annie here was part of that project. And so many of the women were like, oh, I'm not an activist. I'm not an activist, because they didn't lock themselves onto a coal loader, show up at every rally, beat up a politician. But holding actions are very, very important. But then this idea that activism is more than just holding actions, changing structures is actually activism. Changing structures is when we take our business as usual and we turn it on its head. Community gardens, this idea of we're not going to Woolworths, we are going to grow food together. The idea of different kinds of education, nature school, any kind of alternative education, different kinds of healthcare, people taking care of each other through all different kind of modalities. These are changing the structures that we are told in a neoliberal capitalist world that we can't live without. And we say, actually, we can. We can live without Woolworths. We can grow our own food. We can go to a farmer's market. We had a big farmer market in town today. That is changing structures. That's one of the three dimensions. Anybody else want it? Permaculture networks. Thank you, Fiona. Turn on your microphones, and if anybody else has any, a lot of what we do as educators is in this, is firmly, I would say that in A squared, E squared, a huge amount of our work is in this dimension. So you can either, type it up on the screen, thank you, or share, turn your microphone on and share. Laura Jean saying tool libraries, seed savers, produce and plant share, clothing swap. Early childhood movement towards nature play, taking the kids outside, linking it to sustainability. regenerative farming, saying no to plastic, let's scheme. What else am I missing? Changing structures, disrupting before getting subsumed into capitalism. Planting for pollinators, Julie, our bee person. Land care. Amy, does that make sense? Does that like?
Yeah. Well, certainly repairing land is a big one.
Yep.
And that's a community activity that's being embraced by young and old in so many interest groups. Citizen science is a really
Citizen science is a great one, Suzanne.
important for oldies like myself. You know, that you're not working in a real job, but you still have that driving force, that life force to make a difference on the planet or to save it or whatever. And but you want to know more about it because we don't. And so citizen science is all about finding out more information about how ecosystems work, and from that we can apply principles or insights to how we work more cooperatively. And
yeah, thanks, Suzanne. Yeah, absolutely. And citizen, like, yeah, and also sorry, you know, Suzanne, you said you know, a real job. Well, even the idea of like a volunteer economy, or I know people that are job sharing rather than having a full-time job. Even that, like bringing to a workplace that I want to share this job, I don't want to have full-time, whatever, whatever. Something like that would be considered changing structures. You can change structures from within, or you can change structures from without. So you don't have to go and do regenerative farming if you're working in a big institution and you know, bringing all your citrus to your workplace and leaving it there for people to pick up and take home. We're talking about tiny, tiny little things, and we're talking about big, you know, life-changing things. So, well,
that's
they're
what
all
changes
life-changing.
consciousness. That's
Yeah.
what changes the
Yes.
consciousness. It's those little actions.
Yeah. So
Giving.
pop in, see how amazing all of these changing structures are. If you have thoughts about holding actions or shifting consciousness, put those up there as well. Yes, environmental education is shifting consciousness. So big one right there, underline it. A lot of shifting consciousness that we're doing nowadays is through acknowledging Indigenous and First Nation, in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledges. Finally, you know, after years and years. So like acknowledge, not only acknowledging it, but foregrounding it, forefronting it, like making it be like in our town, our Gumbaynggirr elders named the park outside of council in Gumbaynggirr. You know, so and of course some people in town are like, blah, 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 we can't say that. That's shifting consciousness. That's a sign in the middle of town saying that we have to shift beyond our colonial thinking to understand that First Nations people were here, named this place first. So acknowledgements of country, you know, the whole idea of nature connection, you know, a lot of the shifting consciousness is remembering things we might have forgotten as a society, as a Western culture, acknowledging other ways of being that have been around for a long time that we're kind of going, oh yeah, we actually need those things. But also coming up with new ways of being. I'm just loving this so much. It's beautiful to see all these things, and I'm trying to move things around so we can read them. Naomi Klein's work about putting indigenous. So I'm just going to read these really quickly for people that if they can't see the slide. So with changing, I'm looking at the time, changing structures, sense of place, cross-generational living, composting toilets, conversations with friends and family, regenerative education, bio blitzes, clothing libraries, leaving social media, regenerative learning and change. Regenerative is making it up here quite a lot. Smaller houses, refusing plastic, I mean, co-living, a lot of people, lock the gate, community harvest. So lock the gate. Also, oh, the other thing that's really important to say here, and you can also move things. So I would like move, lock the gate to here. So Joanna was very clear that a lot of our actions lie between 2 or even 3 of these dimensions. Yeah. And she's also very clear of in your life as an environmental activist slash educator slash person, sometimes you're going to dwell in one of those dimensions longer than other times. What people that dwell in holding actions, it can be very, like she said, it can be very exhausting work. And I have personally in my life, times, but also friends of people that just burn out and then they go and hide in a cave for years. And that's a very sad thing. So with this understanding of the 3 dimensions, it helps people understand that no, they don't have to, put themselves at the forefront of everything. They can go get in their garden. And that is just as important and relevant as locking on. We need all of them. And you can spend time in each one of them. You can spend time in the overlaps. You can spend time in the middle. Sometimes I actually think with our work as environmental educators, we sit in the middle. Like if we look at all of A squared, E squared, and everybody that's in our organization, A squared, E squared sits in the middle. We want to move more into the holding actions, like with policy making and all that kind of stuff. So maybe as a national organization, maybe we're not quite so strong in the holding actions, but we're definitely into changing how we work as far as structures go and shifting consciousness. Damon Gameau, who was at our national conference, makes it up here with his Future Council, completely changing the way adults and kids can work together. The Millennium Kids are doing that in Western Australia. So changing adult young people relationship and changing structures of power. And that's also, I would say, I would put Damon in between shifting consciousness and changing structures, because he's shifting consciousness around how we relate to young people, right? As well as, changing the structure about how art can be used, right? So all the amazing artwork that's happening right now for environmental causes, that is changing structures and shifting consciousness. The shifting consciousness, slowing down, spending time in nature, country as teacher, which we also had a learning circle about earlier this year, if you want to go back to that one with Monty Nixon. Understanding that we're part of nature. Yes, giving children, young people voice in decision making. And thank you, understanding dependent origination and interdependence, which is a Buddhist concept that was very strong with Joanna's philosophy. And that basically means cause and effect, like everything that happens, nothing's linear. And also this is also a big thing with Joanna. And so just coming back to active hope, I'm looking at the time and going, oh my gosh, we're running out. Cause and effect, very strong with the idea of active hope. The underlying ground of active hope, knowing all this, is that everything that happens in this world is the result of cause and effect, causes and conditions, and not linear. So what that means, and Joanna talked about this a lot, what that means is there is potential in any moment for things to shift in the direction that we want them to shift. Okay? She looks at science. She says, look at if you put a bacteria in a petri dish, and a bacteria that doubles itself every 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, you still can't see anything. 5 minutes later, there's 4 bacteria in a petri dish. You can't see anything. Takes a while for the petri dish to become half full of bacteria. What happens in the next 5 minutes? The whole dish is full. So there's this turning point, this potential of we don't know where our big and small actions are going to lead. And if we, like I said before, Joanna had this great belief that we have all the tools. And if we just understand these different stories, we can move towards a life-sustaining world. So you can see how I get super excited about this. I'm starting to go, woo-hoo-hoo. I am going to take another screenshot because I'm loving this. Thank you, everybody. Fiona's quoting Jane Goodall, everything you do makes a difference. You get to make a choice about the kind of difference you want. That is so exactly right. Screenshot. Now I am going to just quickly move to the next slide. I want to just share for a few minutes, and then I want to make sure I answer any questions. The third tool, which is, and some of you have seen this before because I've presented about this before, but I just want to remind you, if you haven't, and share it with those who haven't ever seen it. Those two, the first two tools, the 3 stories of our times and the 3 dimensions of the Great Turning, are conceptual tools. So they're stories. And Damon Gammo at our conference talked about how important storytelling is and what, can we tell these different stories? This tool is actually a pedagogical tool that I've used in many different ways. And it's the spiral of the work that reconnects. And so you can use this spiral in your personal life, but mostly it's used in group processes. So I've used it with primary school children. I've used it with secondary, high school kids, and I've used it with adults. And you can do it in an hour, you can do it in a day, you can do it in a week. So I was at a 8-day training with Joanna. We worked through the spiral. Okay, I've adapted it for what I'm going to share. This is the spiral. You start with gratitude, you move into honoring our pain, through honoring your pain, you see with new eyes, and then you go forth. I could do a whole learning circle just on the spiral, and maybe we can do that next year. We can do some professional learning about that, where we can really delve into the spiral and how the different ways we can use it. But I turned it into a teaching tool, which you are completely welcome to use, which makes it really much easier to use in a community education or a school setting. And I call it the 4 Gs, which is, whatever, internet, whatever. The 4G spiral, a tool for resilience building in troubled times. And I've developed it through my organization, Center for Ecological Learning. And so the first G, we start with gratitude. And I was going to do this with you, but we're at 6:20, so we only have 10 minutes left. So I'm not going to do all the 4 areas of the spiral, but we will, because I want to leave time for questions in any discussion. Joanna said, anything we do, we should start with gratitude. And that's back to the consciousness shifting. How different is it when you start with gratitude? I don't know if anybody here has kept a gratitude journal in troubled times, but I have, and it is definitely a what do you call it? A self-awareness tool, a well-being tool that even if you write down 3 things that you're grateful for before you go to bed, it actually changes the way you look at life. I promise. What are you grateful for in this moment today, in this lifetime? Robin saying go over time. No, I don't want, I would love to do that, Robin, but I want to respect everybody's time. And I also don't want people to miss out on things, but I think we might, we can do this again next year. So just have a think, what are you grateful for in this moment today, in this lifetime? All the great, spiritual traditions of the world have gratitude practices. And yeah, I think there's not enough gratitude in the world. And it's not like fake toxic positivity. It's actually just thinking that there's a lot to be grateful. And Fiona's saying, regular gratitude creates a shift in your neural pathways. That is really, I would love, that's excellent. There's Fiona, there's probably scientific backup of that. And Sandra, there is. Okay, I would love to see that if you have that. That would be great, Fiona. And Sandra, I'm grateful that you're here. Sandra, I know a big Joanna Macy fan as well. So starting with gratitude. Now, the next thing is a little bit trickier. And we could talk about this. We could do a whole learning circle just about acknowledging our pain for the world. So in a nutshell, Joanna was, and this is from her background as starting in the despair and empowerment, her big understanding through the 70s and that work was that if we deaden ourselves, we are not effective. We deaden ourselves. We cannot move anywhere with that. She calls it the great apatheia or the great deadening. People that don't have the ability or the understanding or the space to express their distress for the world, for what's happening in the world or what's happening in their lives. We do this human thing where we just pull our Duna over our head and we pretend it's not happening. We see this everywhere. And then people self-medicate through over scrolling, over medicating, overeating, over consuming. All of those things, Joanna says, are a symptom of deadening ourselves to what's happening. Some people say, well, fine, if I let out my pain for the world, I would just be a little blubbering mess on the floor and never get up again. And we understand that. So obviously this has to be held. And so this is why the work that reconnects Deep Ecology and Active Hope is so big on collective processes where you work together, you're in community talking about these things. And I've run many, many, many Active Hope and Deep Ecology workshops, and there's always a section towards the beginning of the day or the session where we do have a ritual or a process where we get to express our grief, our anger, our despair for what's happening in the world. And if it needs to be held, right? But then what happens is your heart opens. Joanna talks about your heart opening. The heart that breaks can then opens to hold more of the world. There's a lightness. People are in community sharing their grief. Afterwards, there's more room for growth. And that's the third G. And I don't know if any of you have ever had big breakthrough crying on the ground moments. And then afterwards, you're like, oh my gosh, I can now move forward. But this is the psychology. So this is eco psychology, which Joanna was very, involved in. And then after the opening to growth, we move forward. It's clearer often what our pathways are. So, like I said, these 4Gs I've used with primary school students, high school students, adults. What big or small actions now become possible? Oh, thanks, Fiona. That's awesome. And yes, all of Joanna's concepts and teachings are absolutely linked to Buddhist philosophy because Joanna was a practicing Buddhist and her PhD was on mutual causality and systems thinking. So her research was about the connections between the Buddhist philosophy of the interconnection of all things and systems thinking science. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating work. So with 5 minutes left, here's the spiral as it is, and you're very welcome to use this. And you are, absolutely affordable. Absolutely. All of this is written in great detail in her books. She has heaps of books, but Coming Back to Life is kind of, I would say, the Bible of the work that reconnect. Within the book is not only the philosophies that we're talking about here, but how the processes. So all the group processes. And all of this is free. Like all of this is, you don't have to like go and do a training and da 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 da. Joanna was like, just do it. Get this out in the world. Go ahead, do it. And Active Hope, How to Face the Mess We're In with the Unexpected Resilience and Creative Power is also they overlap. Probably the Active Hope book was written in a more kind of user-friendly way. Coming Back to Life has a lot, I think, a little bit more of the deeper philosophies. And then there's her original book, World as Lover, World as Self, where she talks about the interconnectedness of humans with everything. It's very powerful too. We Are the Great Turning podcast, for those of you who haven't heard that, was done in the last couple of years, which it's a treasure. It's a young woman named Jess Sorrente who sits with Joanna at her kitchen table. And it's like, and and Joanna talking about her life's work. And I think there's heaps of episodes, like 12 or something, about half an hour, 20 minutes each. So that is something that, oh, thank you for sharing. And then websites. There's a website with Joanna's work, Deep Ecology, Australian website, and the Work That Reconnects website. Okay, wow, it's time for the end of the learning circle. Does anybody have burning questions or a comment that you would really love to share with everybody right now before I just share a few events coming up before we leave? Any thoughts, comments? That was a whirlwind. I knew it was going to be like that. Like I said, I just wanted you to have I want all these three tools that I offered, I felt are the most important to environmental education that can help us shift our thinking as environmental education and give us some real tools to use. But again, she has lots more to offer. Questions, thoughts, anything?
Are these PowerPoint images, are they available after this, or is it gone?
Yeah. So the recording will be available to yeah, well, I was just talking to Andrew about that. We're going to figure out a way to share these
Okay.
PowerPoint images
Good.
as well,
That would be
especially
great.
because I want you to be able to use the 4Gs if you care
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
So I will, if you want it in the next day or two, email me at president@a2e2.org.au, and I'll just send you the PowerPoint. Um, Joanna, Sandra's going to go read some Joanna Macy. She's also translated the poetry of Rainer Maria Rilke, who is the most gorgeous poet around about the world and nature. So those poetry books are amazing as well. Before we go, I just want to, I'm not seeing any questions. Thanks, everybody. Unless I'm missing, can we make a collaborative research? That's really cool, Robin. Let's talk about that. Let's do something around that. I would love to do that. So Nicole's saying there's resources in the chat, but don't know how to save the chat. So we can, yeah, we might compile that and put that out as well. Before we go, because it is 6:30, I do want to share that we are having another learning circle next month, and it's on a slightly different topic, but I think Joanna was also fascinated with this. I mean, she was 96 when she died, and she was still completely aware and very interested in everything before she departed this earth. But we are going to have a really interesting learning circle next month on AI and environmental education. Can we be friends? Because we're not going to just ignore this. It's taking over everything, and we environmental educators need to be on top of it. This is part of understanding our world. And Dr. Tilly Wijesinga is a member of our national board, a national exec, and she's going to be in conversation with Dr. Zach Quince, who I work with at Southern Cross University. And they're really interested in looking at how, like the environmental impacts of AI, but also like ethically how it is. And I think that's going to be really interesting. Another thing I just really want to quickly share is we do have a grant open at the moment for our members. $1,000, there are three $1,000 grants available for projects. So if you are like trying to get some little project up and running, or you need a little injection for a certain aspect of an existing project, that's open until the 13th of October. Ask us if you have any questions about that. But yeah, we have some great projects. This is our second round this year, so it's really great. And finally, we really would love to have you share your stories in our new blog. And so please pitch your story. You don't really even have to pitch it. Anything you want to write, we will work with you to share it with everybody, as well as hopefully having updates from our chapters and things that are happening from the national exec. So those are my little pitches right now. I want to thank you, Andrew, for sharing all those. And Meg's asking, do you have any recommendations of how to introduce this work in a high school? I would love to talk to you about that, Meg. This work is so powerful for high school students because the high school students are a lot of them are fully in eco grief and not even understanding why they're feeling like they're feeling. So to share with them the stories of the 3 dimensions of the Great Turning and explaining how they do have agency to make a difference in big and small ways is very important. But in Coming Back to Life, that green book, that's the actual second version of that book. And the second version, this new edited, it's not that new anymore, but they've added a whole chapter in that book, Meg, about how to work with children and young people. And how to do the exercises with them. So that is a really great resource. But email me if you want, we can chat more specifically. And anything else? Did I miss any other questions? Thanks, Viv. The poet was, yeah, thank you. Evelyn, thank you. Yeah. So thank you everybody for being here. I'll hang around for a few minutes if anybody it has any pressing or urgent thing to talk about. I'm super happy. As you can tell, I could talk about Joanna Macy for 2 days straight. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks
Andrew,
for sharing your inspiration and enthusiasm.
thank you. Thanks for being here. I'm glad you made